Welcome to the Leadership Zone. I'm your host, Sheila Walsh, Leadership Development Specialist, Coach and Researcher. Okay, so we're going to speak about let me do that again. Okay, so we're going to speak about three of the main focuses for leadership in 2022. There are three things we need to think about. First, we need to think about hybrid working and the impact on leadership. Secondly, rewind. Okay, hello, Sheila Walsh, and I'm a leadership specialist. So there are three core areas that every leader needs to consider in 2022. And they're not new as such, but they are going to become a main focus for 2022 and a number of years beyond it. There is diversity and inclusion and the impact on what that means to lead. There is hybrid working and why that's different to working from home or working in the office, why there is more flexibility needed of leaders to do that. And then the third is leading in and post-crisis. Now, those three situations are unique to where we are as a society and in terms of evolving and in terms of the kind of corner that leadership is turning at the moment. So we predominantly come from a historic notion of leadership, which is hero leadership, which is one person has the answers, makes all the decisions. As we move into, as a society, we evolve, as workplaces become more dynamic, COVID happened and it's required more from people. Social justice movements have encouraged inclusion and diversity. And so we're in this place where leadership has to adapt. But the thing is that the previous models of leadership, the kind of older models, the versions that people know about, are outdated. And on top of that, we are turning a corner where a lot of people who would have relied on older styles of leadership aren't going to be relevant for the intergenerational workplaces that we have. And so we have to think about these three areas. So let me start by saying, okay, so we'll talk about hybrid working. So hybrid working is different to all other types of working because it doesn't just require the skill to support people in person or to support people at home, but the ability also to lead in a way that working at home or working in the office results in the same quality interactions on teams, results in the same level of collaboration, results in the same outcomes, high performance and high connection. And that isn't the easiest thing to do because a lot of the training that we've had around leadership was actually about how to get high performance because it took for granted that by sharing space, they were already connecting. And now leaders have to think about, are we balancing productivity with connection, belonging? So that's going to be a new part of leading in 2022. Then there's the diversity and inclusion process. So the reality is society's evolved, our workforce is diverse, leaders are expected to be inclusive, but very little leadership development would ever really looked at the psychology of inclusion or the challenges of being inclusive. And so a lot of the inclusive leadership that's being kind of shared now with leaders is a tack onto other leadership styles. So it's kind of saying, oh, just do this leadership style, do transformational, do servant leadership, facilitated leadership, do these leadership styles and be inclusive in the process. So leaders are out there being expected to be inclusive, but you haven't necessarily had the support or the training that you need to be inclusive. So we need to think about that in 2022. What are you learning and experiencing that will make you more inclusive in 2022, and not just have inclusion as this kind of like extra thing you do? Because inclusive leadership is actually about the balance between including for higher performance. So understanding that including people and working effectively with people actually results in better performance, more robust outcomes, better results, things like that. So leading isn't just about including people because it's nice and morally the right thing to do. It's actually about learning to include people in a way that produces results. that's a focus for 2022. And then the next piece is the reality of leading in or post-crisis. And so there's very little understood about this because there's very little kind of global research being done around it realistically. It's always been in sections. But when people go through life-altering experiences, like COVID has provided for people, their work situation has changed, the things they used to feel they could rely on, they can't rely on, all of those things happening, then you've got a situation where leading is going to require you to be more flexible, to understand motivations, to understand values more, to be more person-centered in your approach, because everybody's needs will be different. And so we have to think about that. How do we lead in a way that incorporates what motivates people and what helps people, knowing that people will have different needs, because this life-changing event that's happened, while it's happened across the board, it has different impacts on different people based on their experience. And there's also a likelihood that there's been trauma to your team during this process, the risk of losing work, family members, health, their own, death. All of these things may have happened during this process, and it may not just be COVID. And so we've got to think about a person-centered, humanistic, trauma-informed way to lead when we're facing into dealing with people who have dealt with really difficult situations, as has everybody who's involved, including you as a leader. So the three things to focus on and to start with is to think about which one of these three areas needs your most attention. Okay? So, is it that you need to consider how you're going to lead in a hybrid environment? Is it that you need to consider how you're going to lead in and post-crisis? Or is it that you need to pay attention to diversity and inclusion practices so that you can lead most effectively? So the first thing to do is, out of those three, just pick one that's relevant. Okay, so just pick one. Now that's the area you need to put some effort into. And if you've just picked the area that you've already put a lot of effort into, it might not be the right area for you. We need to think about 2022 as not just your own leadership development, but leadership as a whole is coming to a different level, and the requirements and expectations of leaders is wildly different. Work is now a place of social interaction, of community, and it's not simply a place where you deliver tasks. And the effective leaders of 2022 are going to understand that both the relational and the task is important, and that to be able to do that effectively, you need to be able to step back and look at the situation from a broader perspective. This is one of the only times in any of our living histories where a global experience has happened that has had a global impact on leadership and what it means to work. The Industrial Revolution was the start of work in so many ways. And now that's been revised. We're actually in a really important part of the evolution of work. And it's okay to be resistant to it. It's okay to wish things could get back to normal. It's okay to run off into the future with what you want it to be in the future, because you've got this really deep hope for change, or you might be the person who's resistant to change. But regardless of your feelings about it, change is currently happening. There is uncertainty. It will continue. And it's really important within your leadership that your own personal leadership strategy factors in these three pillars as important parts of developing your own leadership, because most leadership development programs and training haven't taken this into account before. So they might have tacked on things like hybrid working or working after crisis, or, how to be inclusive, but they haven't actually looked at it from a systemic point of view. They haven't actually seen that there are going to be challenges with each one of these areas that leaders are going to be facing. You're probably already facing them in as you start the journey in some way. But the challenges will continue to arise because these are complex adaptations to very complex realities. And so the question is, how are you as a leader going to manage that? And so they're the three areas: hybrid, post-crisis, diversity and inclusion. And it's important for you to think about which area could add the most value to your current organisation and your way of working, and which area you might be challenged with the most. Because one of the things that I've noticed has happened is that leaders are frustrated with employees and different demands and different things happening in the world of work, because they have preferences that would allow them to stay within your own leadership style, your own preferences. But really, this is your chance, and you are required to adapt in order to lead during this time, because it's needed. And if you're not adapting, you're going to either hold your own team back or you're actually going to become irrelevant. And it's really important when you think about your own career that while it might not be your preference for some of the norms that are happening, or you might not feel equipped enough to deal with them, that's not your fault. Nobody has been equipped to deal with them. These areas, hybrid, post-crisis and diversity and inclusion, have been kept in separate little sections on their own. They haven't been held together as central parts of leadership. And yet over the last 24 months and over the next, I would say 3 to 5 years, they will become more and more central because they are required. They're becoming like they're essential through need. So it's not your fault if you don't have these skills, or you don't know what it means, or you're really struggling with it, or you're frustrated. That's because leadership is predominantly focused on hero leadership, tactical leadership. It's focused on that, and it hasn't really focused on these elements that are really important for you and for the future of leadership and for leading now and into the future. So I encourage you to consider one of these 3 areas, to put some time and attention into them. And remember that it's not your fault. A lot of this hasn't been discussed until COVID happened. And over the last 24 months, we've had social movements, we've had COVID, and we've had lots of law changes. And so these things coming together have created this need for leadership to adapt and evolve past what it previously was. So it's not your fault, but there is a responsibility for you to help yourself be ready, able, and capable of leading. Also, it's your responsibility to be able to lead your team, because you don't want to become irrelevant because of your own personal preferences and because you aren't getting the support you need to adapt in the way that's needed. And so a couple of things you can do. So one is you can sign up for my weekly leadership letters, the link is below, which I recommend you signing up for, because I speak about these things and a number of other really important things around leadership and the kind of cusp we're on around leadership at the moment. Or secondly, you can book a direct free consultation with me via the other link below and grab a call to see what kind of support you might need. And we do a kind of informal assessment of that and have a discussion about your biggest challenges, your kind of hopes for your own leadership, and what your next steps might be. Sometimes your next steps are working with me or with another coach. Other times your next steps actually might be something else first, or maybe focusing in a different direction first. So we do an informal assessment to make sense of that. So I recommend that you sign up for the letters, and if you're ready to take action and need support, also book a free consultation. Okay, it's a no obligation free consultation. In the meantime, focus on those 3 things: hybrid working, post-crisis leadership, diversity and inclusion and its relevance to you and your leadership. Those 3 areas are really important, are going to equip you to support your team to perform at its highest capacity, while also allowing you within your own leadership to perform really well and to engage in high performance. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, get on to me. Sign up for the leadership letters below. Book a free consultation if you need support. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Zone. We can continue this conversation over on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is @SheilaWalsh1, or at LinkedIn, you'll find me under Sheila Walsh. To book a free consultation to discuss your leadership needs or the leadership development needs of your organisation, simply visit my website www.sheilawalsh.com and book a free leadership consultation. I look forward to hearing from you.